Okay, good morning, everyone. In this video, I'm just going to go over the writing assignment with you guys. There are three topics. One is on chapter 2, Does God exist if there's so much evil and suffering in the world? Topic 2 is on chapter 4, Can we create a machine that has a mind of its own? And topic 3 is in chapter 5, Do human beings have free will? So you have to take one of them, and write about it. Um, all papers have three parts. The first part is introduction. Introduction means, well, you introduce the subject. The introduction is often one or two paragraphs. So pretty much you keep it brief and simple. So you simply explain what the subject is about. Is it about free will? Is it about God? Or is it about something else? At the end of your introduction, you need to have a thesis statement. A thesis statement is the position that you take on the subject. The thesis statement says what is it exactly you're going to try to do and show in the paper. For example, if you choose the God topic, some people believe God doesn't exist because there's too much evil and suffering in the world. So you're going to take a position. Does God exist or does God not exist because there's evil in the world? If it's chapter 5, do we have free will or do we have or don't we have any free will? So your thesis statement can be, in this paper, I argue God exists even though there's evil and suffering in the world. Or it could be, in this paper, I argue God doesn't exist because there's too much evil and suffering in the world. If it's about chapter 5, free will, your thesis statement could be, in this paper, I argue there's no free will. Or in this paper, I argue free will does indeed exist. Or if it's about chapter 4, can we create artificial intelligence? Can we create a machine with a mind? Your thesis statement can be, well, in this paper, I argue strong AI is possible. Or in this paper, I argue it is impossible to create a machine that has a mind of its own. So again, it's the key claim of your paper. It says what exactly you're gonna try to show in the rest of your paper. Now, the second part of your paper is body. But before you even get to part 2, after your introduction, you could have one paragraph that explains how the paper is organized. After your thesis statement, after the introduction, you could have another paragraph, a third paragraph that explains how the paper is organized. It could say as well, I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to do that, and this, and that, and this, and that. So what this paragraph does, it prevents you from getting lost in the paper. It guides you, because again, in the paragraph, you say step by step what you're going to do first, and second, and third, and fourth, and fifth, and etc. Part 2 of your paper, body development, is where you give arguments for a thesis. Is where you're going to explain the arguments for a thesis. If in a thesis you say God exists, God doesn't exist, then you're going to explain the reasons for a thesis. If in your thesis you say, well, it's possible to have a machine that can think or not, or you say free will exists or free will doesn't exist, then in part 2 you're going to present premises, arguments, reasons for your thesis. For example, if you're going to argue God exists even though there's evil in the world, an argument for your thesis may be, well, evil exists because there's free will. Because God has given human beings the gift of free will. And if we're truly free, then we could abuse our free will. We could make bad choices as well. So you have to make a list of arguments. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arguments of your thesis, for your thesis. and present them in part two. One more thing you have to do in part two is to take possible objections against your thesis. That is, expect anyone reading your paper, expect me who's going to read your paper to disagree with you. Expect me to go and try to find flaws, errors, mistakes, weaknesses in the arguments. I'm going to read it. I'm going to find some problems with it. So this means you gotta take this into consideration. What is it somebody reading my paper may have to say against it? What weaknesses, what objections somebody may have against everything I just said. For example, if you say the reason why evil exists because human beings have free will, once I read that, I will agree with you. But I will also say, well, about natural disasters, earthquakes and tsunamis and diseases and hurricanes and viruses, this pandemic and bacteria, cancer. How about children who don't know anything about good and evil, who don't know anything about sin and grace and redemption, none of that. Children, newborn babies who don't know anything about free will, they suffer, they also die in agony. So I'm going to raise these as an objections. So again, in part two, make a list of the arguments you have for your thesis. It could be 2, it could be 3 arguments. You present them, give examples, be as objective as you can. Don't say, I feel. Be as objective as you can. So present your arguments, give examples for them. It could be data even for them. Then after that, you take into consideration possible objections against everything you just said. Since you give argument 1, 2, 3, what is it someone reading a paper may have to say against everything that you just said? And part 3 of your paper is a conclusion. The conclusion is not a lot. In the conclusion, you simply repeat the main points. You simply do a brief summary of everything you just said. Or depending on the paper, the conclusion can be a call to action. It could be a call to action. It could be a call to further reflection, pondering of the subject. Or again, most likely it will be simply a brief summary of the key things you just said. Also, you need outside sources. Please don't use Wikipedia. It's not an outside source. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. That's a good website you could use. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And your best chance is to log online on the databases of the library and to find articles. Also, you could take something from a book, from a newspaper, from a movie. So if you're going to quote somebody, please, you have to cite this. Have a citation page at the end of the paper to avoid plagiarism. All right? Don't go online and copy and paste anything, because you have to turn your paper into turn it in. So this means I'm going to know. I'm going to know. Okay. So to summarize, introduction, introduce the subject, tell what this subject is about. Is it about God, free will, AI? At the end of your introduction, have a thesis. That is the position you take. In this paper, I'm going to argue God exists. God doesn't exist. There's free will, there's no free will. And between the introduction and part 2, you could have a paragraph that explains how the paper is structured, organized. This is for your own good benefit, so you don't get lost. So you know step by step how you're going to write that paper. And then part two, you present your arguments. Make a list of arguments. It could be 1, 2, 3. Present them, explain them in great details, give examples, make the best case possible, the best case we can make for a thesis. And then after that, take into consideration objections against your thesis. Again, expect me reading the paper to go and try to find problems, errors, mistakes, weaknesses in your arguments and try to answer them on your own. And then part three is simply your introduction. So it's simply your conclusion. Again, it's simply a repetition of the key claims, key arguments that you made in part two. All right. Thank you for watching.